Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
It's Prose, it's Cons, it's the Prose and Cons podcast, the podcast by writers for writers. Today I'm hosting, I haven't hosted in quite a while, actually, thinking about it. I'm Paddy Boylan, and joining me this week are my esteemed friends and colleagues, Phoenix Raig.
Hello.
And Matan Alor.
Hello. I haven't been called esteemed in years, and I gotta say, I can get used to it.
You're absolutely esteemed. You're both esteemed in my eyes. I esteem you both.
I just had a recent vaguely traumatic event with being called esteemed, which is this is such a specific anecdote, but it's you
don't usually associate the word esteemed with trauma, but yeah, okay.
No, I was in a local grocery store here, close to closing time,
and you're in Spain, right?
Out of the store, yeah, and to get people out of the store every 20 seconds. Over the loudspeakers, it was like "clientes estimados," like please, blah 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 blah. And I was like, oh my gosh, trying to get all my stuff before I had to get out of there. Being called an esteemed client every 20 seconds, it was very high pressure, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Until just the mention of the word esteemed makes you kind of twitch, and
now I want us to be the esteemed Precipice Fiction, just because of that.
Welcome to the esteemed Precipice Fiction podcast, the podcast by esteemed writers for esteemed writers. We'll just start again from there.
Because sometimes we feel esteemed.
And sometimes we always feel esteemed. So this week, it almost surprises me that we've gone so long without touching it. Today, we're going to look at dialogue. Dialogue is maybe half of a book, maybe a third of a book sometimes. And we're going to break down our process, what dialogue is for, and the kind of anatomy of dialogue, what makes good dialogue, what makes bad dialogue. Before we jump into that, though, let's go around and see what you guys have been. I was going to say consuming, and I know we use that term, but I've always found that word really, really gross, like the idea of consumers. So I'm gonna take a stand and not say consuming.
I'm up for changing it up.
What have you guys been reading / watching / I guess that's a reason.
Put it into your brains.
What have you been putting into your brains? There we go. Matan, what have you been putting into your brain?
I have started The Mirror and the Light.
The last very good.
In the trilogy, the Wolf Hall trilogy, which, for those of you listeners who are not familiar, it is a trilogy that shows us the life of the advisor of Henry. I'm going to picture this. Henry V or Henry VIII?
You're 3 off. That's not
Henry VIII. Yeah, the guy with the 6 wives. Read it. Super well written, but because I'm aware of the historical circumstances and fates of many of the players involved, I am flipping the pages with mild anxiety and trepidation.
That was a really good
myself.
way to say that without spoilers, by the way. I really appreciate what you did there.
Yeah, so I'm enjoying myself, but I'm also, first of all, I want to pay my respects to the writer of Wolf Hall. She has passed away. I just want to make sure I say her name right.
Hilary Mantel?
Hilary Mantel, yeah. Obviously, as readers, oftentimes read the writings of writers who are no longer alive, and that is a very natural part of reading. But I don't know how many times I got to start a series and finish it with the writer passing on during that process.
Very true.
It's just a different feeling. It's like, I know that when I finish that book, I'm saying goodbye to a person that doesn't really know me, but I feel like I kind of know them.
It did feel that way. I was about 2/3 of the way through, and it's an enormous book when she died. And finishing that book was even sadder because I know there'll never be anything else from her. I was about to say a massive spoiler, but I won't. Yeah, all right, but I feel that.
Listeners, pick up Wolf Hall. I am 99% sure you're not going to regret it.
Phoenix, what have you been putting in your brain?
I've been putting Breaking Bad in my brain.
Yes!
Finally, yeah. And I realized that, because I had picked it up before and then I put it down, not because I didn't like it, I just ended up putting it down. And I realized, watching through this time, that I'd watched the whole first season previously. So we've watched the whole first season, I'm now in season 2, and now it's all new and uncharted, and I don't know what's going to happen. And it's very
cool.
Good.
I'm so excited for you.
Phoenix, I gotta say that the exact same thing happened to me. I watched the first season. I dropped it. and then I watched the whole thing years later, like in one hit. Don't know why.
Yeah.
It's definitely a little
Yeah.
slower at the beginning, but I think by around season 3 or 4, it starts to pick up pace and doesn't slow down. And then, yeah, I'm very excited for you to go on this journey, Phoenix.
That's wild you say that, because it already feels so fast to me. Like, honestly, they covered what I thought was going to be the plot of season 2 in episode 1 of season 2. I was like, oh my God, okay, this is moving.
Kate and I, my partner and I, are watching it again for the second time, and I'm writing this book at the moment. I'm getting a mentorship, and I'm really having to restructure the whole book. The structure is not so great. So for the first time in my writing life, I've really been paying attention to the structure of things. I was super impressed by Breaking Bad. Like episode 1, it's like, bang, this is the conflict, this is the tension, this is what's happening, this is what's at stake. I was like, oof, that's good.
I feel like the Breaking Bad is the writer room. They're sitting and they're asking themselves, so what's the worst fucking thing that can happen right now? And they say, okay, just write that. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, but it never feels
what
too
it feels
far.
like.
Yeah.
It feels tangible. It's like, what's the worst tangible thing that could happen right now? Let's write that first, and then we'll figure out how he gets out of it.
Yeah.
And
Beautiful.
That's what interests me, because it's like, how is he going to get out of it?
Do you guys know the term jumping the shark? Have you ever heard that before?
No, but I feel very, very curious. What is jumping the shark?
I used to have a girlfriend who was a scriptwriter, and she told me where it came from. I don't remember, but it's when a show does something that's so like ridiculous and out of the bounds of what is normal and like believable for that show. They just go like, come on, like that's never going to happen. I'm thinking like every second episode of Lost. Yeah, I feel like Breaking Bad just never jumped the shark. The shark was always firmly in the water.
I think they poke the shark.
Yeah.
They pat the shark.
They do. They don't jump it.
There's no need to jump over the shark.
There's not.
Just
gesture at the shark. Here is a shark.
Yeah.
It is
just
here.
Sit there. There's a shark over there. Like that's enough. That's thrilling.
We're aware of the shark.
That's from Happy Days, by the way. That's where that comes from.
So what's
with the Fonz?
Okay.
So the cool guy Fonz, like he's so cool, so hip. You know, he's in a diner most of the show. Apparently, I haven't seen the episode, but at some point they have that cool guy character jump over a shark on water skis, and it's just like, why? Like that was unnecessary.
Yeah.
I have a tangent about sharks that I'll share with you guys after the podcast. It's related to albatrosses and a remote island in the Pacific Ocean.
Listeners, you can subscribe to our Plus subscription service to hear Matan give this story about this amazing. We don't have a Plus subscription service.
I tell you what, if you sign up to the mailing list, I'll include this sharks and albatrosses thing in our next mailing list.
Yes, we have a special offer.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
If you sign up to our mailing list, you'll get
Phoenix. How can listeners sign up to our mailing list?
Yeah, all you have to do is go to precipicefiction.com, and if you scroll down on the main page, you'll see the option to sign up to our interdimensional mailing list.
Wonderful, and you should definitely do that, listeners.
Mm-hmm.
For myself, I'm reading Save the Cat Writes a Novel. Really good book on story writing. Highly recommend it. And I just want to say, while we're talking about dead authors, that Cormac McCarthy died. The legend Cormac McCarthy, who wrote Blood Meridian, No Country for Old Men, The Road. What a haunting book that was. Yeah, his family passed on, which is very sad. And now I want to reread some of these books just to get some more of that amazing writing. So, dialogue. It's wrong to say every book has it, but almost every book, almost every film has it. It's an absolute cornerstone of writing. It conveys information for the plot. It gives us information about the characters. It brings us characters for life. It sets them apart, and it gives clues about hidden information in the story. And that's something that'd be fun to touch on a little later. But writing dialogue is hard, and writing good natural sounding dialogue is even harder. It's something that a lot of writers, even really good ones, don't always nail. I often use Isaac Asimov as an example of a writer who has bad characters and dialogue. I really like Isaac Asimov's writing for how much I dump on him. But there's this, it's been a while since I've read it, so I might have it wrong. There's a short story called The Last Question, and it jumps forward like thousands of years at a time to see humanity at this point, and this point, and at this point, until eventually it's so far in the future that I don't want to spoil it. But they all kind of talk the same. They all talk as these like 1950s NASA engineers. It's really, it's like, wow, that we never progressed past the 1950s. Oh, that's kind of remarkable. Can you guys think of any examples of books or movies or stories that you've enjoyed or maybe not enjoyed that has really been let down by their dialogue?
Ooh.
I'm going to start off and say that no, because dialogue is, to me, the bread and butter of a good novel. Now, I'm not saying the dialogue has to be a certain percentage of the book for me to like it. It's not about quantity. It is definitely about quality. It is very hard for me to immerse myself in the story because the easiest way to pull me out is bad dialogue. And we're saying this as if, oh, that's easy, just don't write bad dialogue. Man, this is hard. I think that bad dialogue is so easy to write, and that's because while you, the writer, are putting down your dialogue, there are two conflicting forces that wishes to use the dialogue. One of them is your plot. Your plot is sitting on your shoulder while you're typing and say, ooh, tell them about the thing. Tell them about the thing. And as a writer, you really want your reader to know maybe about your world building, maybe about the mystery that you're crafting. And I think sometimes it's important to remember that the dialogue needs to be the characters talking to each other and not the characters talking to the reader, which is, it's just our instinct. I need to have this information on the page right now. I can tell you about a lot of books with excellent dialogue, but poor dialogue, I usually don't last.
Okay. What about you, Fangs? Can you think of any examples of things with bad dialogue, or you in Matan's boat?
This isn't a, like, I've actually never thought of, I can't think of a book I've read that, like, has let me down in terms of dialogue.
I guess
obviously,
not
like,
a lot of them make it to the publisher.
Exactly. I definitely have some examples of interesting dialogue, but I'll get to that later. But I do like, that being said, like, I've edited a lot of works with dialogue that needs a lot of work, obviously. But no published works that have let me down in terms of dialogue.
When I think of bad dialogue, what comes to my mind is Star Wars: The Force Awakens. I really have you guys seen that movie?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Would you agree that maybe its dialogue isn't absolutely top notch?
Now that you mention it, like, I haven't seen it in a long time. But that movie was, the whole new Star Wars trilogy was not great to me for a myriad of reasons. But now that I'm thinking on it, I'm excited to hear what you have to say, because I'm pretty sure I agree.
I actually liked a lot of the film. I liked the visual design and everything. I thought the world building was really cool. There's this one scene with Kylo Ren, who's basically the new Darth Vader. Slight spoilers for anyone that hasn't seen it, so 3, 2, 1 spoilers. He's meant to be this really intimidating bad guy, right? And the first time we see him is walking off this spaceship, and he's got his suit and his mask, and he looks dark and imperious. And he's got this captive main character called Poe. And there's this moment of tension, and then Poe says, "Who speaks first? Do you speak first, or I speak first?" Like, as a joke. And it absolutely undermines the tension they're setting up. Like, we're seeing this villain for the first time, and they've already made him slightly ridiculous and made him like a scene of fun. And then he delivers this line of dialogue through his, like, evil mask, and it's got, like, a voice distortion on it, you know, because it's an evil mask. And Poe says, like, you know, I can't hear a word you're saying through that mask. Can you guys hear him? And he, like, looks around. There's a term for this, actually. It's called bathos. Bathos, kind of like pathos. And it means when humor or lightheartedness suddenly comes into something that wasn't humorous or lighthearted and just completely subverts the scene. That to me is so much bad dialogue that I can think of is exactly that.
I'm going to step up and defend Kylo Ren. I never thought I'll find myself in this position. So first of all, I think bathos is a great thing to pay attention to, because it can be abused. And I think that's very good that you brought it up, Paddy, especially by us writers who are so heavily influenced by the MCUs of the world, where it feels like everybody's got to quip and be witty.
Yeah.
With that being said, I did not finish the most recent trilogy because I was just disappointed. I didn't even watch the third one. And not because there was a burning anger inside me, but a cold, quiet indifference after just not caring.
Yeah.
With that being said, Kylo Ren is, in my opinion, an attempt at a live-action Zuko from The Last Airbender. And I will die protecting that character, because the reason they're making you laugh at him is because they don't really want you to fear him. They want you to feel like, look at this misguided kid. He's not Darth Vader. He's trying to be. He's playing make-believe. We want you to see what's behind the act.
He's in the shadow.
Yeah.
That's a really good analysis, because, like, the whole New Order was meant to be these, like, young fascists who were just kind of playing at being the Empire.
The youth. But that's the problem. Bathos comes with a cost. You cannot zigzag. You cannot have me see through the mask and think A, and then try to scare me later on in the movie or even in the sequel. And what happened in Star Wars is basically there was inconsistency. You cannot. What is even the theme of the first two movies? What is the combined theme? But anyway, we're going on a tangent from dialogue. I do think that in general the dialogue in that movie is not good. I haven't watched the third one, but there's an infamous line about somehow the Emperor is back. I think it's very infamous, even though I haven't watched the movie. Just again, dialogue being used as a vessel for transporting plot to your viewers rather than characters actually conversing with each other.
I agree with Matan. Well, I agree with both of you, actually. That's definitely Kylo Ren's character is living in the shadow of Darth Vader, and you're meant to not feel fully intimidated by him. That being said, I do think, like, I remember what you're talking about, Paddy, and that subverted that subverted it too much for me in a way where not only did I not take the character seriously, I stopped taking the movie seriously because it felt it pulled me out of the fiction because I was like I get what they're going for, but they've just subverted the tension of this entire scene. Like the stakes of the moment completely fell out from under me.
I think you almost lose trust in an author when there's moments like that. You no longer trust them to just like, you take your hand off the wheel and say, okay, just guide me on this story. I'm in for whatever. When they do something like that and they really subvert their own tone, it makes you think like, do I trust you as the driver of this vehicle? I don't know if I do.
Yeah, I think that trust is so important when we're reading a novel because trusting the writer is what keeps us quiet when we're confused and we don't know so many things.
Good point.
Yeah.
I just, maybe later, but I have a piece of dialogue I'd like to share with you guys
Please.
about voice.
Yeah.
First of all, I will say I got this piece of dialogue. Obviously, they didn't write it, but it was posted on the Reedsy blog at reedsy.com. I feel like they deserve credit because they did collect all these beautiful pieces of dialogue. And it is from The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. And before I read the dialogue, I just want to say that one of the tips that I received as a writer is be careful of accents. Because accents can be annoying and tiring to read, especially if they involve a lot of spelling mistakes and it's just weird for the brain. Sometimes it shoots us out of focus and we're kind of like, oh, so what is he saying really?
Yeah.
On the other hand, we're also always advised that characters can't all sound the same. And that's so hard because characters tend to sound like us, the writers. So how do we make it so it doesn't feel like I'm just talking to myself in my own voice? I would like to share a short snippet of a conversation between Bilbo Baggins, the hero of The Hobbit, and Gollum, the creature, because Gollum has perhaps one of the best speaking mannerisms I've seen in fantasy. Okay, let's go. It's very short. So Gollum says, "What have I got in my pocket?" he said aloud. He was talking to himself, but Gollum thought it was a riddle, and he was frightfully upset. Not fair, he hissed. It isn't fair, my precious, is it, to ask us what it's got in its nasty little pocketses? Bilbo, seeing what had happened and having nothing better to ask, stuck to his question. What have I got in my pocket? He said louder. S, hissed Gollum. It must give us 3 guesses, my precious. 3 guesses. Very well, guess away, said Bilbo. Handses, said Gollum. Wrong, said Bilbo, who had luckily just taken his hand out again. Guess again. Sis, said Gollum, more upset than ever. Now, on a technical level, the writer, J.R.R. Tolkien, chose to do 2 very interesting things with Gollum. One is he talks in with the pronoun we. He talks in the pronoun we. Now, that obviously leads us to the mental situation that Gollum is currently in.
Yes, very questionable.
But also, so that's explainable, right? There's Gollum, there's Smeagol, his alter ego. Maybe there's some other shades in there. So it makes sense that he would speak that way. But something cute that he added is the addition of S's at every single verb. And the ES and the misuse, because usually we add the ES, I'm not going to go grammar here. When we have a verb that ends with CH, like watches, washes, Gollum adds it to everything. And if the verb already had an ES, then Gollum throws in another one for good measure. So that really makes him sound so distinct and in a way that I find that is not overwhelming for the reader, because it's still easy to see what
Mm.
he means.
Yeah, absolutely. When you mentioned accents, I don't remember which Redwall book this is. Oh, by the way, do you guys know the Redwall series?
Yeah,
I've
with
heard of
the
it.
rabbits. Is it the
Yeah,
rabbits?
children's fantasy, and they're anthropomorphic animals that have like fantasy battles. It's all light and fluffy. It's actually very sweet books. I recommend it if you're listening. There's I read this when I was quite young, and there was a character who was like, let's say, a badger or something, and I think he was meant to have this kind of really broad Scottish or North English accent. And the author had gone out of the way to write it in such a way as to make it sound really accented. I found it indecipherable. And granted, I was a little kid, but he had changed the dialogue so much that I was really straining to make it through any given sentence. Definitely, like affectations like the Gollum S is really cool. It can go too far. If it starts to mess with the comprehensibility, that's probably not great.
One thing I ran into recently with something I was editing, and I think this might be a problem as well, is like consistency. Like people sometimes it's like it can be exhausting to keep up, and they'll kind of dip in and out of it. Or I've seen before that accents like suddenly pop up and go away, and it's kind of wild. But I notice when I'm reading a work and I see an accent, it's like at first it's like exciting. I'm like, ooh, it's almost like a little mind puzzle to figure out what they're saying, but that goes away so fast. So it's like the reader exhaustion gets very real very quick because they do need to figure things out very quick. So I would say Golems works well. I think Hagrid in Harry Potter is my limit. That's about as much as I could handle. Where it's a nice balance where it's like you feel the accent, but it's not like every word is something you need to struggle to grasp. As well as Hagrid doesn't have a lot of page time. So because of that, the reader's given a lot of time to rest, and you can enjoy the accent, but not every character has a written English accent because it's unnecessary and it would be far too much.
Yeah, and it just becomes an impediment to like the flow of the story at that point. I mean, you guys have probably heard the same. I've heard it said that good prose and dialogue as part of prose should be invisible. I mean, it's good, but it's not something that should jump out at you in a way that takes you out of the story. It shouldn't break your immersion in the story. Unless, of course, it's meant to and it's deliberate because there's exceptions to every rule. But I think as a rule of thumb, subtle is good, right? Restrained. Why are you smiling so much, Matan?
I'm with you. No, because it's true. It is true. It's like every time I hear a writing rule, I can come up with an example of someone who broke it well, but I'm going to say a very tired cliche. You have to understand the rules to break. You have to know the traditional way. You have to understand why it is done the way that everybody's crowing at you to do it. Understand it, master it, and then throw it down the pipe, whatever way you want to do it. There's a reason people say dialogue should not be accented. There's a reason people say dialogue should be clear, because when I'm confused, I just lose interest, I think. I think a lot of readers, if they feel like, what's happening on this page? What did he say? I understand that this is a Scottish accent, but I genuinely don't understand what he meant. And that's where we lose interest and momentum, and we open the phone and we check our emails and
and that is the death of the story once the emails are checked.
Oh, God.
Going back to what you were saying, Phoenix.
Go ahead, Paddy.
No. You are my guest. You're my guest in my home. You're such a podcast today.
You're such a good host, Paddy.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I just mentioned this, and this is something, it's relevant in dialogue. It's relevant in a lot of things. It's called reader fatigue, and it is when text gets too heavy or too intricate in a way that the reader starts to exhaust and wants to put down the book. I had first heard it when I had first started using an editor, and they came back to me, and that's when that term first appeared, and I was like, whoa, oh my gosh, I immediately know what you're talking about. And it's a note I give to people a lot. So it's about like putting the thing on the page and then reducing the words to say it, because you want to try to communicate it in fewer words so that the reader actually has to do less work to understand the idea. And adding an accent, as well as there's some other things I notice in dialogue, it just increases that mental work that the reader needs to do. So you do just need to be careful with how much weight you're giving the reader to lift mentally in order to understand what you're talking about. And you need to balance that weight with things that are easy to understand. And that's why dialogue is an excellent tool to break up plot, because it gives the reader something easier to digest a little bit to help lift that mental load so that they're not so entrenched in description and context setting and all that all the time. You give them that break. And yeah, that's the thing around accents, as well as like contractions are a great way. Fun little tip. Contractions are a great way to reduce reader fatigue without really doing much to your work. Instead of saying is not, are not, blah, just make it isn't, aren't. Snap it together. And then only use is not when it feels pertinent to the moment. Like I'm very intentional with all of my is nots. It needs to be like for an emphasis reason in my book. And then if not, just like make it isn't, make it aren't, shorten it up, and it just makes it zip that much quicker.
I feel like I just learned so much in those 2 minutes of explaining. That was good. Especially like now that you mention it, when I think back on dialogue that I've read, yeah, that really flows, and it's those moments of description and when they break out of dialogue that they're more difficult to read. Not difficult necessarily, but harder. And I wonder if that's something psychological and neurological, like the way people speak, the way natural dialogue sounds is just something we're geared toward and able to process really easily. Or is someone giving a description of, what the hen house outside is like and how the street is dusty and how there's an old woman sweeping isn't really natural sounding.
It is pretty nuts, because it's like, I wonder if it's like, because when you're reading description and stuff, your mind is actively working, constructing the world around you. You're trying to build and visualize. Whereas when it's just dialogue, there's still visualization going on, but it's more like you're just listening to a conversation, and it's more, I don't know, it is just easier.
And I wonder if, obviously, one of the hallmarks of good dialogue is that it sounds natural. It's totally believable, and there's never a moment where you think like, I'm not sure if they'd say that. And I wonder if unnatural sounding dialogue, again, has a bigger cognitive load because it doesn't sound like the natural rhythm of dialogue, or it doesn't sound like how someone would really speak.
Speaking to that, I think one of the best tips I could give new writers, and something I struggle with myself, is just think of the conversations that you have in your day-to-day life. Let's say that your partner or your best friend just had a job interview, and they go to the job interview, they come back, you sit down. You're more likely to say, hey, how was it? Than you are to say, hey, how was the interview on Oxford Street for the job as an editor that you've been waiting for the last 10 years and it means so much to you.
You mean the one that I applied for 4 times, but I've only just now got the interview?
As you know, I've applied 4 times
yes,
and I only just got the interview. So first of all, it's kind of a trope that we like to laugh about, is that as you know is the killer of good dialogue. Because if you know it, I wouldn't say it. Now, I think that we all have that inner fear that if I'm too subtle, the reader's not going to get it. First of all, the readers are probably 20% smarter than you realize. Take that as your starting point. Second of all, that's what, honestly, maybe they won't. I'm not going to sit here and promise you, oh no, the reader's going to understand whatever you mean. You just have to mean it, even if you're very subtle. That's why you have better readers. Start in a minimal way. And if you need to, you can always add. But trust your reader to at least give them a chance to get without you hitting them on the nose with it, especially when it comes to dialogue, because that really feels unnatural. Because like you said, your partner's coming home from the interview, they look tired, you're just going to ask, how was it? And they'll say crap, like, oh man, what happened? And now's your chance to say, oh, the guy asked me all these weird questions I didn't expect. Oh, what about, my job experience? Okay, the reader is starting to get it. They're starting to understand, okay, must have been a job interview. And you've done that sounding a lot more natural. And like Phoenix said, a lot less exhausting for the reader to follow it.
I know what you were saying about sometimes less is more. I totally agree. You can go too far in the other way, though. Phoenix, I'm sure you've experienced this with editing. Yeah, sometimes you just like, I don't know what you're talking about, dude. You're just not giving me enough information. I think that's really where editors and beta readers can help. And listener, if I didn't know the term beta reader before I started with Precipice Fiction. It's if you think about beta software, the software that's not fully out yet, but it's open for a small community of people to judge. That's what beta readers are for your story. You've got it to the point where you're ready to show some people, but not the rest of the world. And beta readers are invaluable for telling you those parts where maybe you've been a little too restrained, not giving quite enough information.
I know it's not a beta reader episode, but I gotta drop this really important thing about beta readers.
Yeah.
Don't tell them what's the book about. Don't tell them the entire plot and then let them read it. So many writers
Mm.
do it. They're so eager to tell, oh, sorry, I wrote this book, and the big twist is that the guy's a werewolf. So do you want to read it? Well, okay, but then you've robbed yourself and them from the genuine reaction to finding out that the guy's a werewolf. So don't do that. Okay, just give them the book and shut up.
Absolutely. That's really solid advice. On what you were saying about unnatural dialogue, that it's too much information. The info dump is a classic trope about dialogue. I'm thinking of the villain who's got the heroes at their mercy, and they stop and tell them what their evil plan for world domination is.
Yeah.
Which not only is it totally nonsensical, like, why would you do that, dude? What if they escape? It's transparently the author just trying to give exposition of the plot, and it always feels kind of ham-fisted.
If your villain has to explain his plan, maybe his plan is not very good.
Or it's so good that he has to share it with someone.
Yeah.
No, it's like your plan doesn't make sense.
They just want to be seen. Although I would love that as a twist. They're explaining it, and the what they get back is critique, and it's like, couldn't you have done? And it cuts. It's like a cut to like 2 hours later, and the villain's just like, oh, I see what you mean. Like, so you would have done this and this.
That is actually very good. Good dialogue, by contrast, is subtle, and it gives us information in subtle ways. It straddles that line between too much information and not enough information, just enough to keep you guessing and make you think, there is something going on here, and if I keep paying attention, I can learn it, which is a really hard road to tread. But again, beta readers are really useful for that, and it's so satisfying when you finally get that. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy, written by Cormac McCarthy, based on a book of his.
I have seen it, and I'm not the same person.
Yeah. yeah. It's harrowing. Do you guys remember the scene with Anton Chigurh, and he's the villain with an incredible haircut, and he walks in? Matan, you spoke about this just the other week.
I need a glass of water if we're going to discuss that scene. Because go ahead. Yeah, I'm here for it. Go ahead.
He walks into a convenience store, and this guy is an assassin, and he's really, really scary. And he basically says, he torments this guy, right? He starts to just like mess with him, intimidate him, and halfway he says, what's the most you've ever lost in a coin toss? It's really, really ominous. I won't go into details, but the whole way you get this incredible sense of threat. You don't know exactly what's at stake with the coin toss, but you can tell it's terrible. If the writer had said, like, this is a coin toss for your life, you're going to live or die, that wouldn't be nearly as interesting. It's dancing around the subject and really being subtle and coy with it that makes it all the more menacing. You think it might be him talking about killing the guy, but you don't know. That's almost scarier than just him saying, if you flip this wrong, I'm going to kill you.
I mean, one look at his haircut, and you kind of know, don't you?
Yeah,
I mean, you look at the guy and you're like, yeah, this guy's.
There's something wrong with this guy.
Yeah, he's not here to play. Man, that haircut should deserve an Oscar by itself.
I heard that they chose that deliberately because they wanted it to seem like he's from no place or time that's ever existed. They wanted him to seem like an absolute outsider. Like, what's a haircut that no one would have and maybe no one has ever had? Like, that's the one.
What kind of wig would an alien impersonating a human put on? Like, trying to look like us.
Yeah.
What is this character's name? I gotta look this person up right.
Anton Chigurh. Anton and then Chirgur. Listener, if you're listening to this, it's a hell of a haircut. And how intimidating he is and how large and scary just makes it all the
I mean, Ethan Hawke is in that movie, but nobody remembers that.
I don't know who that is. I know the guy's name, but
that's the guy that took the thing, and he's being chased by the guy with the coin.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's just swallowed by the presence. Ethan Hawke, if you ever listen, I'm sorry, you're a great actor, but he's just swallowed by the presence of this other guy.
Yeah. Moving along.
It's not what I was expecting, but it's
no one could expect it.
It's kind of surreal.
It's the Prince Valiant on the scariest man you've ever seen.
Yeah. Okay. I'm satisfied.
Listener, it is so worth it.
Real quick, another example of good dialogue. If I'm giving too many of them, cut them off in the editing room. But,
no, I think this is what this episode is for. This is exactly the point.
The story is called A&P. A&P is a kind of supermarket chain from the US, written by John Updike many, many years ago. So just to give you, I'm really going to read 3 lines. But basically, this young, sexually eager guy is working at the supermarket, and 3 girls in swimsuits walk in, and he's really feeling it. Okay, He's sitting next to this other guy who's 22, so he's the older guy, he's the responsible guy. They're both just watching. There's like 4 paragraphs describing the 10 lines. Anyway, I'm not going to read that. What I am going to read is the dialogue between them. Stokesy is not the main character, but Stokesy says, "Oh, Daddy," Stokesy said beside me, "I feel so faint." "Darling," I said, "hold me tight." Now, a lesser writer would have told us, Stokesy said, laughing, smiling. Or, "Darling," I said, joking.
Yeah.
Of course they're joking. Of course he doesn't really call him daddy. And of course the guy doesn't answer, "Darling, hold me tight." But that's what I meant about trusting your reader. They get the
Yeah.
joke. You don't,
Yeah.
by explaining that they're joking, you lose a lot of the immersion of how natural this conversation feels.
It reminds me of Stephen King's advice from On Writing. He talks about dialogue tags, and dialogue tags, listener, if you don't know, is like he said, she said, he yelled, she yelled, they yelled. Basically, he says, just use said. Just use said. He's quite zealous about it. Like, don't have they shouted, they whispered, they inferred, they answered. If it's good writing, 95% of the time, the fact that they're whispering, the fact that they're shouting, or the fact that they're angry will be in the dialogue. And the dialogue tag, when it's anything but said, like we were saying before, how good prose should be invisible, just draws attention to itself, where it should be the dialogue that's taking center stage. And the dialogue tag is just something in the background to let you know who's speaking when it's required.
Exactly.
I've tried to use that a lot myself. I think my writing's better because of it.
I feel that, no, for sure. I'm going to keep an eye on that for myself, actually.
Yeah, because the adverbs are they're really comfortable crutches. Get rid of them, and you'll kind of force yourself to do better with the prose.
He also said the road to hell is paved with adverbs, which
It does say that.
Mwah.
Off of that, just a follow-up tip. If you are going to be using said, and this goes for all dialogue tags, even if you're using they whispered, they muttered, blah, and you're just doing that. If you have a bunch of them back to back, they said, they muttered, blah, 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 and you just like down the line, a bunch of dialogue tags, regardless if you're using said or whatever that is. Just because you're using different dialogue tags doesn't mean it's going to feel varied or anything. It actually gets very stiff, very stale, and feels very repetitive, and it's going to pull a reader out very, very fast. It's something I would pull out very quick from a manuscript. So watch the overuse of dialogue tags.
Yeah, it's almost like you notice that they're trying to vary it. Like, oh, I can see what this reader's doing. They're trying to mix it up. Yeah, you don't want to see the stank of the author on the work. So those are some of our thoughts on what makes good dialogue, bad dialogue. There are works of fiction out there which have no dialogue, and there are some works of fiction out there that have only dialogue. I've read one of one kind, none of the other. What do you guys think? Have you ever read a work that goes in the extreme one direction or the other? What are your thoughts on it? Would you like to? Do you think it could work? Because the one work that I have, there was only dialogue. I have thoughts about it.
I mean, it's called a script, just only dialogue.
Yes.
Again,
sort of.
I'm sure there are writers that are capable of pulling this off. I'm not one of them. Like if you can write a book that doesn't have dialogue or only has dialogue and you make it good, power to you. I'm not going to jump into that one. That particular shark, I'm not jumping on.
I haven't read anything that was solely dialogue, but I have read stuff that was like principally dialogue. And that works by our very own A.R. Eldridge. He's very dialogue heavy, but he does it in a way that actually makes me jealous, because it's like his style is he likes to express and create through dialogue and let the characters create the scenes. And as a result, the scenes really zip and fly through, and they feel light and nice, and they're wonderful to read. And it makes me go like, why aren't I writing with more dialogue? But at the same time, my style doesn't gravitate that way. And I'm just like, dang it, Alex, you can't just do that. And it's kind of like this internal question of like, well, why can't he do it? And I'm like, I don't know, because I'm not doing it, but it works very well. And because dialogue is so easy to digest, it does create a very light sensation. I haven't read anything that was just dialogue, so I don't know how that would go if it just proceeded as dialogue and there was, scene creation and things like that in dialogue, which obviously you can do, but I've just never experienced it as like only dialogue.
Actually, I was dumping on the idea, but actually there is a very successful book that is only dialogue. Oh my God, why did I not remember this? It is called Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It is very good. It has been turned into a Netflix show. Just to show it to our YouTube viewers, Daisy Jones and the Six. YouTube viewers, you can see. I will describe it to those of you who are just listening. It's literally just dialogue. It's almost like an interview. Actually, it is. It is a group interview. I believe that's the format of the novel. Very, very readable. Taylor Ray Jenkins also wrote traditional novels. She's famous for The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, another bestseller. But yeah, it worked for her. She did the whole thing just as an interview. In fact, I would say that a lot of people that maybe wouldn't usually pick up a book have given this one a try.
I can see that because everything artificial about a story seems stripped back. And for people that weren't watching the video, it's like script format where it's got the name of the character speaking, dialogue. The next line, name of the character speaking, dialogue. I really like the idea of that. I'm also thinking of a movie called Hunger about the Irish hunger strikes. There's a scene with an Irish political prisoner and a priest that comes in to see him. It goes for like half an hour. It's a good portion of the movie. It's just them talking at a table, but it's so engaging.
I love, what is that called? Is it called a bottle episode or something? Where
no, I don't know that term.
I don't remember. But when setting is very minimal and it's just character focused, like an episode of something or an entire like what you just described, Paddy, where it's just two people sitting at a table, very character focused.
Yes,
I love stuff like that. I had walked in on my sister a few times watching like Doctor Who or something, and I never all the time I was like not interested.
What do you mean?
I know.
What do you mean you walked in on your sister watching Doctor Who? Is that not allowed?
I phrased that so weird.
Is there?
No, what I literally mean is I walked into the living room and she was watching Doctor Who. So it's not like it's not like it was secret, but it was
Doctor Who is okay, guys. You're allowed to watch it.
You're allowed to watch it. You're allowed. But I was never attracted to it at all. I was like, what's going on here? Like this, I actually like this. The setting offends me. I really don't want to look at this. Like it was like Daleks were on the screen. I was like, I reject. But there was one episode that pulled me in, and from there I started watching it. And it was like a very closed, dialogue heavy episode. And it was literally the whole episode was they were crashed on a planet and they couldn't go outside. And it was kind of like the murderer is in the room sort of episode. And it was just in the small cabin of this spaceship, and it was all just showing how they react to the situation and what the dialogue is and how, the human psyche reacts to pressure and suspicion and all these things. And it was so tense and it was so beautiful. And from there, I started watching other episodes, but it was that small scene dialogue heavy episode that pulled me in.
There's something very pared back with the dialogue only things. It almost feels pure. Like everything that is not just human interaction has been stripped away. Yeah, I think it can work really, really well.
Just tiny piece of advice. And I got that advice mostly from my wife, who's not a writer, but she's one of my most loyal beta readers. And I always notice that if a conversation doesn't tell her something that she didn't previously know, she looks kind of disappointed. And that's something that I think a lot of us writers have to consider. Now, if you write in literary fiction, I think that's not necessarily a valid critique because literary fiction does tend to take its time. But let's concentrate on genre fiction, especially if you got a mystery going on or you got world building going on. Take the opportunity. Every time you got two characters talking, the reader has to get something out of it. Now, you don't have to tell them the big secret, but tell them one thing. Try to make that a rule. Every time two characters meet to talk, the reader has to walk away with one thing they didn't previously know. Obviously, something that's relevant to the story, right? Don't just tell them what the guy had for breakfast, but give them something. Give them a breadcrumb, and they'll follow your conversations like happy little orphans looking for the parents in the woods.
And if something happens between the characters or happens to one character that the reader has already seen, and because the reader has already seen it, it wouldn't be engaging for the reader to have the character just disclose what just happened on the page to another character. You can instead, if you do need them to inform the other character about what happened, like about something the reader already knows, it can be an opportunity to give character development. How does that character give that information? As well as you can do subtle things about world building. You can show language variations. If the reader already knows the information, it can be a fun opportunity to play with how much does a character withhold And that could be the new thing you give the reader, is it's no new like information about the plots coming out, but you're seeing character interaction around what the reader now knows.
Yeah. We could talk about this infinitely, and really we've only scratched the surface. In fact, I'm sitting here in front of a page of notes, and we've only moved through a third of it.
We're going to dialogue part 2.
We could do dialogue part 2. We honestly could revisit a lot of these episodes. I think that there's always more that we could say about this. But alas, dear listener, we have run out of time for today. Phoenix, do you want to close us out with a quote?
I'd love to close this out with a quote. Just gotta find my other window. I'm still looking at Anton's haircut.
You will never stop looking at it. I have it in my wallet. Okay.
That's not healthy.
This is my nephew. That's what Matan tells people. All right. This quote is by Judy Bloom. Nothing teaches you as much about writing dialogue as listening to it. Boom. Short, sweet. I agree.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Judy. Once again, this has been Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction Podcast. We hope you've learned something. I know I've learned something. I learned a hell of a lot.
I've learned something.
Actually.
I learned so much.
And join us.
Buy the new Mythic.
Buy the new Mythic.
Oh, yeah.
That's our anthology. If we don't spruik that at the end of the episode, we're failing a salesman. Buy the new Mythic.
Also, if you did enjoy this podcast, go ahead and leave a review. Like and review it down below, or give it some stars. Write something about it. Tell us what you liked. Ask a question if you like. But yeah, the reviews help us get seen, and that's great for us. So yeah, if you could leave a review, we'd really appreciate it.
Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen, for Precipice Fiction for this week. Join us next week. Get some more information on writing for you to get better as a writer. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
See ya.
About that albatross.
You're listening to Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction Podcast.